Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show.
Aloha, everybody.
Oh, you're such a dick.
Welcome to Guerilla Sports Off Ice. JJ Jerez, Meghan Angley, Jesse Montano here to break down the week that is and the week ahead of Avalanche. It's time. We made it.
I didn't think we would, dude. And even truthfully, like today's the one day with no activities. It even still feels like it's
Right.
still far down the road, but it's not.
Yeah, usually I have more show prep for any given show. This one, I still don't really have any because still waiting for things to happen.
Obviously,
Obviously,
sell yourself out there, though.
training camp. Hey, full transparency, right? The people are part of the show. They don't just so
This guy's unprepared.
Yeah, jeez.
unprepared. Well, yeah,
Loser.
after a week in Hawaii, it's hard to just kick it right into gear.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
This is like the worst podcast set ever for me because you were in Hawaii, you were in LA, both of you were at the beach.
Yeah. I saw a sea lion.
Really?
Yeah.
That's pretty sick.
It was really cool.
I've never seen a
Like
sea lion in person.
Just swimming around? Or
Yeah.
lounging?
He was in the water.
Oh, that's cool.
Wow.
He
Usually
moved
they're just
quick.
on the wharfs being lazy.
He moved quick and he was going closer to shore where there were even more people. It was surprising.
I've heard they are getting like weirdly aggressive in certain parts of I don't know where sea lions are. But that there's just like the beaches are too crowded and they're just like kind of making their own room. So thank God you survived.
Yeah. I wasn't in the water.
You didn't go chase it down?
No.
Well, I'm glad you guys both enjoyed your beach vacation.
There was a free aquarium on the pier too.
What?
Yeah.
Where at? Manhattan Beach?
Yes.
I didn't see
And
that.
it was a little bit small, but there was a goldfish tank and the goldfish was upside down. And Jay was really worried. And we looked a little more and there's a sign that said, "Don't worry if the goldfish is upside down. He has gas and it's supposed to alleviate the gas." So
Huh.
That's
it
hilarious.
was a really good aquarium.
See, this isn't just a hockey show. You learn something too. I did not know that goldfish go belly up when they have gas.
It was kind of concerning.
Well, it sounds like you guys had a good time out there.
Yes.
I got sunburnt for like the 4th or 5th time in my life. So I'd like to
Oh,
take
wow.
a quick second to shout out and acknowledge everybody that has to deal with sunburns on a regular basis. That is awful.
You've only ever been sunburned a handful of times in your life?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's pretty
Yeah.
crazy.
And it's only on my like golf tan, right? With the areas that didn't get sun all summer long. Those so I basically now have a golf burn.
Yeah,
And
dude,
then my other
sunburns
thought
suck.
from being down there is like, man, when you leave from altitude to sea level, how impossible it is to get a
drunk.
buzz going.
Yeah.
Right? Like I was drinking a lot and still felt very coherent. Like, does that go away over time, or are they all just lightweights compared to us? Or do they just have to drink excessive
Mm,
amounts to even feel anything?
I think your body adjusts eventually. Like I think after a while
It's exhausting having to drink that much.
Yeah, I mean, you and I talked about it. There's too many stipulations to drinking. It's too hard.
Yeah. It makes you feel gross. Now I feel like I put on some pounds. I need to have a training camp of my own for the next couple weeks, getting this in shape.
Chugging liquor. to try to
Media
make it work.
training camp.
But no, Megan, yeah, let's get into the rookie showcase. Rookie face off, I think, is the correct title for it, right? I guess your coverage of it was exceptional. So good job on that. You kept us all
Yep.
very informed. So I don't think there's
Outstanding work.
much you can say here that we haven't already heard you say. But I guess just give us a blanket. What did we learn from the rookie face off, and what can we take from that into camp?
Well, I think we've talked about any criticisms of the development pipeline and how there is a cost to winning championships and it comes at the expense of the prospect pool. This is not a dig at the prospect pool, but usually the Avs prospects fare better in this tournament.
Mhm.
So for them to have not won a single game, I think was a combination of a few things. But one, there were a lot of invites this year, so it just wasn't made up of tons of players who were internal to the Avs organization and had some familiarity with them from, face-off debuts before. Like, this was a debut for a lot of players internally and externally through some of the invites, and I think it showed in the overall team performance game by game, you could tell that these guys just weren't very familiar with each other, and it created some challenges just from a chemistry standpoint. Like, I actually remember from the last rookie face-off, the group of Anaheim prospects is such a rowdy, lively bench, encouraging one another, and that was exactly the same this year, and it just feels like there's a level of familiarity that they had among each other that didn't exist for the Avs rookies. So that, I think, was one of the takeaways. It just kind of dawned on me that the Avs do still find themselves in a unique place with their prospect pipeline just because of the cost of winning. And some of that then has meant replenishing it in more unconventional ways. And Ivan is a success story in that sense because he wasn't a traditional prospect, had a great rookie showcase last year, another great one again this year. And I know the organization has beefed up their development and scouting side over this offseason in hopes of finding more players like that. And I think this tournament just kind of reinforced, one, the need for it, but also the possibility for success there in seeing Ivan work really well with an Avs prospect like Max Caron, who is still very raw. And you could it's funny to call someone like Ivan at 20 years old a leader in this tournament, but that's just the situation the Avs prospects find themselves in. And it was a bummer that they couldn't win any games, but the players who stood out were the ones that should have, and so they laid a good foundation going into main camp. And I think the other big takeaway is you just can't glean very much from this rookie face-off, maybe as you could in years past. Like, Malinsky's rookie face-off really popped off, and that translated well into NHL conversations almost immediately. Whereas for Cal Ritchie and Oscar Lawson and Barons, there's still a lot more that needs to be seen in main camp before we have that conversation.
When you're talking about the way that they compare to maybe that Anaheim bench both last year and this year, that's a group that's, they're kind of coming up to the prospect pipeline together.
Yes.
I know some of them will go back to their individual teams and stuff, but sounds like what you're describing is like that's a group that was there last year. A lot of the same guys coming back, trying to make the push for the NHL roster. And like you said, this was an interesting tournament because there was a Cal Ritchie out there. There was an Ivan who you have some higher hopes for. Sean Barron, like there were some individuals to watch. But I agree with you, and I wasn't there. But, watching the streams back home, it just looked like top to bottom, the Avs prospects just aren't in the same place as those other teams. And the part that I want to stress to people is like, that's okay.
I don't think it was a skill issue. I think it was a cohesion issue.
Well, and not only that, but like how, and maybe this, but there's probably a lot of high end draft picks skating for Anaheim, San Jose, even Utah, who have all been picking top 10, top 15, stuff like that. Little bit of like when you have a larger pool to pull from. You're smiling. What?
San Jose dressed 10 forwards and 8 defensemen in their final game without Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini, and the Avs dropped 5 unanswered goals. So
I think these rookie showcases, rookie faceoffs are less about results and more about just getting guys into the organization, see how they can play within the certain system, right? And I think, yeah, of course you'd like to go out there and win, but they're keeping an eye on, okay, how does this individual play after being coached the way we're trying to coach them, right? And so I guess, did you see, especially out of guys like Cal Ritchie, guys we want to see make that jump, how much positive did you see out of guys like that, especially when it comes to individual effort more so than team?
Well, I was thinking about it over the weekend and I couldn't decide where I landed, but I almost worried too, if they had been winning all of these games, would we have learned even less? Would some of that skill overshadowed some of the raw parts of their game that would be the final piece to get them to go to the next level? Like, would that have been overshadowed if they just outskilled everyone around them? And I think that could be true in ways. I still would have liked to see them just completely pop off in, that environment against their peers that isn't quite fully pro just yet. But I think even in losing games, you learn a lot about what players will do to make an impact and be visible and try to change the course of a game. And I learned even more from the games that players weren't in. I saw the impact a player like Ivan had in game 3 where he didn't play. I saw the difference it made on the whole of the group. And similarly in game 2, when Richie and Barons didn't play, I saw how sorely they missed Sean Barons' breakouts and how they missed Cal Ritchie's playmaking. It made such a difference when they did play that I think the losing result, or, having them just play 2 of the 3 games, actually taught me even more about them. And for Richie specifically, what stands out is the first 20 minutes of the opener, he was a little bit quiet and not as visible as you would have expected him to be. And he internally talked to himself and made the in-game adjustments needed to have an incredibly productive final 40 minutes, but just a productive weekend on the whole, a multi-point weekend for Cal Ritchie with 3 assists just in that first contest. He was able to translate some of his junior production, and that was a struggle for the whole Avs prospect group. Schneekloth joked it's hard to score, and that's sort of what these young players kind of need to know. They're coming from environments where they are leading goal scorers.
Best player in the league.
Yeah, they kind of need to be humbled a little bit and get that recognition that it gets much harder as the level ramps up. And so I think for Cal Ritchie to be faced with that, but also find ways to still create, was also really valuable in getting an idea for where he's at specifically.
Well, it's encouraging to hear you say that about Cal Ritchie, because you and I talked about that. You had already left to Hawaii, and that was one thing that you and I talked about was, to me, the production for Richie, that was kind of like you and I said, like, we're going to treat that as a given. It's the expectation he's going to go out there and, have points on the board. But it's really encouraging to hear you use the word adjustment, that Cal Ritchie as an individual was able to say, okay, that didn't work. That didn't go well. And to kind of be able to, and maybe he had conversations with coaches and stuff like that, but to look at that and say, okay, what didn't work and what do I need to do differently to have a positive impact on this game, whether it's through goal scoring, assists, points, or just, Jerry Bednar talks about all the time, you can be effective without being, on the score sheet. And for him to be able to make those tweaks, like, that is highly encouraging to hear as you head into main camp, because that's, to me, saying, okay, this is a kid who understands what he's up against and is learning how to adjust his game to fit a higher level, faster pace, bigger players, stronger players. To me, that just kind of, pressure is not the right word, but maybe ups the expectation that we should see a near NHL ready prospect out of Cal Ritchie this week.
I liked his physicality too. It doesn't look like a player who gained 17 pounds, because I guess, our frame of reference for his starting point, we just didn't really know what that looked like in season for him. So he looks like he is the size he should be. And I think he absorbed contact, among some big, strong guys that are a little bit older very well. And so I do also think that side of it isn't a concern, and he looks fully healthy. Same with Oscar Olausson. I think both of those players looked strong, and that was important because they were 2 players who had injury this last year.
Yeah, and it's important, you brought up the Sean Barons breakout. I think it's important for those guys to excel at what they're good at in an environment like this, right? I'm also curious, how much did you catch of other teams? Like, how do you compare the way the Avalanche organization kind of runs their prospects and runs this type of tournament versus the way the opponents have?
It's a really good question. I hate that I'm the type of person who wants to think on it for a second. It's not good for a live podcast, but just reflecting on the way that San Jose approached the third game, for example, they have a lot more players with NHL ambition right now that they need to sit out for consideration. And I think that is what led to such an undisciplined game 3 on both sides, because the players that were left for San Jose were the type of guys who were maybe a little bit more fringe and observably out of that conversation because they're still playing in game 3. It doesn't mean they're written off completely, but I think that ramped up the stakes a little bit for what they were playing for in that game. Whereas from the Avs prospect side, I think fewer of them are in that position where they're realistically fighting for an NHL job right now, but they're still trying to make a good impression. So they struggled to find the balance. Like, the guys guilty of being the most undisciplined were kind of the more fringe American League types. And I think that it's just what showed later in the tournament when teams who do have those players that are looking at NHL minutes, they kind of knew what they had in them. Whereas for the Avs, it felt more open and light, just a learning environment for everybody. And I do think that there were some newer players to the tournament on the Avs side who showed that undisciplined quality as well. But the pro guys like Steinberg, he's somebody that he fought in this tournament, but in the game where things were starting to get out of hand, he didn't engage in the extracurriculars. And so I also think that was a testament to his understanding of what not to do in that environment, whereas it did look like with some of these other teams, there's a lot of players still figuring that out.
Well, and then the thing you said that you needed a minute to think on it and then gave a great answer. The thing I was going to chime in with to give you a minute to think was that, like, again, the thing that I just keep coming back to that I find interesting, because when this tournament first started and it was held up in Northern Colorado the first year, it wasn't like this, but it's also a testament to the Avs organization that since this rookie tournament started, really every team that was involved, it was the Avs, the Ducks, the Sharks were coming out of their relevancy at the top of the league. The Ducks were already struggling. The Kings were starting to struggle again, in the later 2010s. The Avs have found a way to separate at the NHL level as an organization, while you still have, what was the Arizona Coyotes, now Utah, who are still part of this tournament. The Avs didn't play them, but they are still trying to work their way back to the playoffs. The Ducks trying to work their way back to the playoffs. The Kings, I don't fully know what to make of them. If you go back 2 seasons, they were no good, or if you go back 2 summers, they were no good. Then they were playoff teams each of the last 2 years. The Avs are the only team among this group that is separated as a true Stanley Cup contender. They even won one, while this tournament has been going on. All the rest of the teams are still trying to figure out how to take this group of prospects and turn them into legitimate NHL teams. And just when you said, how did the Avs approach to this, maybe compared to the other teams that are out there, that's just one thought that came to my head isn't it interesting? If you go back to, I believe it was 2017 when they did the first tournament.
The one
here.
at Promenade?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I think it was 2017, maybe 2016.
I think it's 2016.
It was either right before the 48-point season or immediately following the 48-point season. And how the Avs have been able to take what at that time was considered a high-end group of prospects. Cale Makar wasn't there because NCAA. But they were considered to be one of the better prospect pools in the league. Well, they've translated that into a Stanley Cup championship and, kind of perennial contenders every year since. And yet you have the Ducks who are still trying to figure it out. The Sharks who are right in the middle of a rebuild, to the point that you were just making, Megan, of they're actually holding rookie tournament players out because they think that they're going to be NHL regulars. I remember us going to this a few years ago and seeing Trevor Zegras out there for the Ducks. And it was like, oh man, here he is. This is, one of the next, and Trevor Zegras is great. Hasn't gotten the Ducks anywhere. So I don't necessarily know if this has anything to do with the Avs approach to the rookie tournament in particular, but for all the flack that they get about developing and drafting, well, suddenly they went from having one of the better prospect pools to having one of the worst prospect pools, but a Stanley Cup championship. So they've done something right with the players that were coming through the pipeline, to the point where now they're really kind of an outlier at these tournaments in terms of what I think each team is maybe hoping to see out of their group of prospects. Is that calling them an outlier? Is that maybe a stretch too far?
It helps a lot too for me to narrow down what is different for the Avs. And it just means something different for them in terms of what they're looking to learn from it. To hear Schneekloth talk about how they're not constructing their lineup game by game with winning in mind, they're just looking to see what these players are made of. And that's the other thing. There's no in-game adjustments that are happening from a line perspective. It's clear some of these, they weren't producing in a few of these games, and there's no changes being made. It's really just a learning environment for the coaches. It almost even has less to do with the opposition. It almost has less to do with who they were even going to play of the three, the 3 teams that they get. I don't know that Colorado was really sweating that all too much, because they knew, they didn't get Celebrini, they didn't get Will Smith, they didn't get Shane Wright in the Seattle game. And I think they just kind of knew it's not really about who they're playing against or the other prospects that they're matching up against, though I'm sure they would have liked to have that information for their file. It's more about what they're looking at just internally.
Well, and then I want to go back to something that you said, JJ, about and it goes hand in hand with what you said. The weekend for the Avs, and I don't think for any of the teams is it about winning and losing, but the Avs are looking at stuff, I think, like you called out. How are your habits? We're coaching you a certain way into the system. How do you respond to that? You know, how do you implement the details of our game into your game? That's what the Avs are looking for. The Ducks, the Sharks, Utah, even to an extent, the Kraken to an extent. And then again, maybe LA is the one other that's a little bit removed. They're all looking for, all right, who are the guys that can make an impact in the NHL this year? Who are some guys that we think can make us better right now? And the Avs just aren't really out at these tournaments right now looking for that. Yes, you have Cal Ritchie this year, who's maybe the exception to that rule, but for the most part, JJ, you're right. They're looking at how coachable are you?
Yeah, I think you have to kind of take the whole tournament with a little bit of a grain of salt, right? Because it's about evaluation. The players know that. You want to fit into the system and the structure, but you also want to stand out, right? And so I know these players have been going through tryouts and different showcases throughout their entire lives, so it's nothing new to them. But at the same time, there's this element of just almost confusion for these guys of like, all right, how do I stand out while fitting in and, just making everything work? So
how do you stand out in the right way without going too far?
Not in a bad way.
Sure, right. So I think for the team, it's nice to get out there, evaluate some of their own players, maybe even keep an eye on some of the other teams and maybe some guys who are, bubble players, fringe guys. But it's, I think, just a good way. And not to mention the discrepancy, right? Like you mentioned, Trevor Zegras, Macklin Celebrini, like those guys are going to be NHL studs. Meanwhile, they're out there with guys who might not ever even sniff the NHL. Right. So it's just a good way to get out there, start getting the wheels turning on the season and seeing who out there stands out.
And I also think it's a good, it's good for these kids to get into that type of situation before going into main camp. Because it used to be last year, you'd do one ice, or not last year, before they started doing the tournament, you do one day of off ice, dry land training. Then they'd get on the ice for some like really boring, very skills heavy, stuff, the rookies. And then suddenly he's like, oh, here comes Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar. Are you ready? And it's like, no. So I think it's good for them to get in those game situations. Can I tell my favorite rookie tournament story?
Yeah.
Please.
So this was 3 years ago, I think.
How many have you been to? Because like you said, they started, I think, 2016. Yep. I remember JT Comfer being at that first one.
Yep. He was at the first one up at Promenade. That was here. I went to that one. I think I went to the one in Arizona, the one last year in Vegas, and then I didn't go this year. So I think I've been to 3. But it was in Arizona. And the thing about this rookie tournament that I think I didn't realize at the one that was here because of how it was set up and everything, but like it's mostly scouts. It's mostly scouts, a little bit of media, and then a couple of fans. I think it goes like team personnel, scouts, media, fans. Like it's mostly for team personnel. And I was standing next to a scout from the Vegas Golden Knights, and the Vegas Golden Knights prospects were playing. And on his notebook, he had a regular, I think I told you this story. He had a regular side notebook, and he had every player that was playing, their number, last name, and, a designated area of his notebook to make notes on each guy. And one of the players from Vegas grabbed the puck, no pressure on him, and he just iced it. He just picked it up about the top of his own circle, easily could have gotten the neutral zone, and probably pretty easily could have coasted to the red line, chipped it, and got a change. He just picked it up, looked, and just fired it down the ice. The scout next to me, I looked over, he looked for his name in the notebook, all caps, lazy, double underlined circle, and then he closed his notebook and left. I was like, pack your bags, kid.
I wish you knew who that was.
I know. And again, it was no one it wasn't a name that I recognized, and I haven't seen since. Probably because he's lazy. But that was I just remember that because I remember thinking what the hell was that? And then I saw him write that. I was like, well, that's an interesting way of interpreting that, and that's probably the end for this kid at the NHL level.
Megan, any good behind the scenes stories that maybe pop up to your mind from the last weekend? And I mean, obviously he's held that in his back pocket for years now.
Nothing as damning as that, but there was conversation in game 1, not scouts within the Avs organization, concern around like not really seeing Cal Ritchie at first and instead noticing Ivan, which was great for Ivan. He was, on their lips anytime that he was on the ice, and then they were also looking for Cal Ritchie, like, I haven't even seen him. Where is he?
Mhm.
And he came out a little bit later and they said, okay, there he is. And so there was that moment where Cal Ritchie started to come alive in that game, and it was noted among the scouts as well. But there was that concern, I think, that we shared in watching it and texting back and forth after the first period, but I don't think we were alone in that initially.
And it was stemming from a place of expectation. And I think that's, Megan shared that story with me because we were texting back and forth in that first game, and she goes, I haven't noticed Ritchie. And it was funny because when you sent me that, I was like, oh shit. I was assuming that I hadn't noticed him because we got this kind of, I'm watching on the stream. If Megan's there and she's not noticing him, that's not good. And again, it comes from a space of we had the conversation of like, he should go out there and be noticeable. And so the fact that there were scouts who were looking for him, that tells you that, again, there's some expectations on this kid. And I think that's a good thing for an Avs prospect right now.
There's stories that like paint some Avs guys not in a great light. And it's things that anyone watching it could have seen too. So it's not like top secret information. But Keaton Mastrodonato in the game 3 didn't make the best impression. He actually even scored in that game, but he was very undisciplined in it as well. And you could hear at one point, I don't know what was going on with the acoustics in the arena, but you could hear the ref giving it to him and making some comments about like the way that he's playing hockey isn't even hockey at that point because he was just so undisciplined. And it was not great to hear that, but you could also see it. Just one of the goals against, I believe, was his fault because he was sitting on his guy at the net front and holding him down and instead just screened his own goalie and it led to a goal against. And so you really felt some frustration, but he was a guy that, he's coming over to the Eagles organization newly, trying to make an impression, and he just made the wrong one. And in the same game, the goalie left the crease to confront a breakaway chance that they'd given up on the power play. And he left it so bizarrely. Like, he went on a journey. He was dang near center ice by the time he got to the skater who just blew by him and scored on the empty net.
Well, you know what's so funny about this? You want to know how I know that this was an egregious play? Jay told us about it. Jay came in, he was like, there was this goalie who just like skated out of the net. The guy went right around.
Jay looks at me and goes, was he supposed to do that? I said, no. And okay, I feel bad. I was a little hard on this goalie. The net kept coming off its mooring, and I thought he was doing it on purpose to get play to stop because it hadn't happened in the first period to the other goalie when he was there. And so I was just like, man, he leaves his net like a wild man. He just keeps knocking it off to stop the play. And then it started happening in the next period to the goalie when he was there. So I felt really bad. I think it was just not secure.
I've seen a beer league goalie get called. They eventually called a penalty on him. And he was like, whoa, what? They're like, you got to learn how to stop, dude. You can't just keep running into the net.
It felt like that's what it kept happening more than it did to the other guy. So I think there was a little bit of both happening.
Yeah, he was hitting the post a little extra hard.
It's interesting to hear that a ref, even if a ref is telling you how bad you're doing, you got to start from scratch. And
well, because at first, like, our bench was like, dude, that's like the 4th time he's done it. He's like, guys, relax. And it was by halfway through the game, no, man, delay a game. Like, we can't keep doing
just
this.
like the guy being undisciplined too, right? When you're hearing it from a ref, like, figure your shit out. But I think that's kind of the issue with having these at, like, I mean, I know it's the LA Kings practice facility, but it's also a little a youth hockey rink, right? And when it was at Promenade, it felt like that building was built for something like this.
Like that, yeah.
Whereas the LA Kings practice facility, I don't necessarily agree. It's kind of very junior high-ish to me. I don't know. I think the Arizona one was pretty decent.
It's cold as
the ice was bad. The players were talking about it, not on record, but it wasn't good.
So Blake actually reminded me, the ice being bad. What do you remember about that practice in LA last year that you and I went to?
Oh yeah, Nathan McKinnon breaking his stick over the net.
Furious over the ice conditions. So when we went out there, and this is the funny stuff that like Blake has the memory for. I was like, yeah, LA. He's like, well, the ice is gonna suck, and I was like, oh yeah, it's always warm. He goes, no, dude, don't you remember Nathan McKinnon hated the ice? I was like, Oh yeah, you're totally right. But so I'm not surprised to hear that. That sounds like it's a bit of a theme at the LA practice facility.
Speaking of terrible facilities, training camp.
Yeah,
What a
good,
great transition.
good.
I think
Hold on real
Yeah,
fast.
go for it.
I just wanted to, Megan, you did an outstanding job out there. We have exclusive one-on-ones with you and Cal Ritchie, Brian Wilsey, and Kevin McDonald, AGM for the Avalanche. Of course, Wilsey had director of player development. Cal Ritchie, the top prospect that's come through here for the last couple of years. Those are on the Guerilla Sports YouTube page. We'll link them in this video as well. But I highly, highly recommend you go get dialed into all three of those before camp tomorrow. There's just so many good bits of information and insight in there, talking about prospects, their development philosophy, roster battles, things like that. And while you're there, actually, what is it, 5 or 6
Yes.
sit downs that you did 2 weekends ago up in Vail with Dan Heino, Milan Hayduk, Darren Helm, Pierre Turgeon,
J.M. Lyles.
John Michael Lyles, and Kyle Quincy are all there as well. Megan, you've done, I think, 10 one-on-ones since you got here 2 weeks ago. And they're all absolutely fantastic Guerilla Sports exclusives. Make sure you guys go check those out as soon as this show is done.
Little tire pumping for you mid-show.
I know. I wanted to leave in the middle of it. Just hop off the set. I don't know how to take compliments.
Chloe is probably freaking out in there right now because that.
Is it a phone?
It's a studio phone. It's got a flashing light on it too.
I didn't know they made landlines. I wasn't born.
I wasn't born. Sorry, training camp.
No, yeah, let's get in training camp a little bit. I mean, I feel like we've covered extensively over the summer kind of what we're looking out here for. I think we're all excited to see how Casey Middlestat does in his first full season with the team. But anything else you guys can add? I'll start just to give you guys a second to think. For me, I think goaltending is a huge question mark right now in the organization. We've seen with the way they've stockpiled goaltenders up and down the organization. Like you brought up, they a lot of invitees to the rookie camp. These goalies, we were like, who are these guys? I think the rumors about the Avalanche getting heavy into Askarov just tells you exactly what they think about their current goaltending situation. If I'm Alexander Georgiev, I'm taking that personally, and I'm coming out saying, I want to stay a part of this team. I want to give myself an amazing chance to win. I don't want to get shipped out to who knows where. I'm going to have one of the best training camps, one of the best seasons of my life. So my microscope right now is on specifically Alexander Georgiev, on how he prepared for this season and his approach to the offseason. And let's see it in action, right? You can't just simply say, I'm going to do great and then do great. You got to put it into work. And of course you can't ignore what happened in the playoffs and how everybody wanted to ship him out of the country, let alone out of town. So yeah.
And then he flipped the script on that.
Flipped the script and did awesome. So let's see. Let's not put ourselves, if I'm Alexander Georgiev, in a position to have to flip the script. Let's be great from start to finish here. And I think that's going to be a huge goal for him and just something I'm keeping an eye on throughout the year. Well,
and he's a guy too that, I've told this story on the pod before. I believe it was when we were in Toronto for the All-Star game. And Brooksy, he covers the Rangers, who, Tortorella used to always get into it with him.
You know what, Brooksy?
Yeah. Ask Georgiev. He said, well, you always said that you thought you could be a starter. And he was still asking the question. Georgiev cut him off. He said, no, I knew I could be a starter. What I said was I needed the opportunity. And you could tell that, even just him saying, well, you thought you could be a starter, Georgiev took that personally. And it was like this, no. There was no thinking about it.
He's so dialed in when you're any interview, post game, practice interview. He's staring you right in the eyes, listening to every word you're saying because he wants to respond adequately, right? A lot of guys
spoken, but
a lot of guys just generically listen, throw out a vanilla answer. He wants to hear what you're asking and answer your questions specifically and to the point.
No, you're totally right. And again, to that point, he was not going to let that word thought go by without correcting him. And I do wonder how that mentality, I've been told by people before, and again, this is the part that we maybe don't get to see behind the scenes. I've been told he's got, quote, a little bit of Nathan McKinnon in him, that he's just got that kind of edge and that switch that can just flip. And he's crazy dial in, super intense, high expectations for those around him, so on and so forth. So I'm with you. I'm curious to see how a lot of that chatter, the fact they went out and drafted what seems like they feel is the goalie of the future in Nabokov. Like we'll see how he responds to that. To me, it's the battle on defense. The hallmark of this team 2 years ago when they won the Stanley Cup was everything runs through our defense. Our offense runs through our defense. The way we pace the game runs through our defense. The way we obviously defend and break pucks out of the zone runs through the guys on the back end. This is a very different looking group than not only 2 years ago when they won a Stanley Cup, but last year.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very different group than last year. And I think they've brought in guys that you can dream on a little bit. And there's a lot of exciting upside with Shillington and Brandstrom, let alone Sam Malinsky, who Megan, you and I had talked multiple times that this is a guy that I don't think anybody should be sleeping on. I put him right in there with Brandstrom and Shillington in terms of where they're at. And now it's on him to go out and prove that. And then I'm curious to see how they're going to handle Calvin DeHaan. Is he going to be the Jack Johnson from 2022 role where he's the set and forget seventh defenseman and you're really fighting for stuff in front of him? Or is he going to be a guy that they're saying, no, you're our staple, our Josh Manson light, if you will, on the third pairing, who isn't same as, Cale Makar, Sam Girard, Brandstrom, Shillington. I really want to see how that shakes out. To me, that feels like a legitimate battle on the back end that we have not seen since Cale Makar got to town. And they've kind of had those pairings set. Yes, they had Josh Manson at the deadline that 1 year, but like there hasn't really been a true battle on the back end in a while. And I'm curious to see how they fill this out.
Well, and we're hearing from informal skates, namely Brendan Vogt, doing a great job out there at these
at the rink, Colorado.
BV, that's
What?
BV. She tried to give him a nickname.
I tried to give a
hated it
nickname.
right
I
away.
hated it
Say
right away.
BV?
Yeah, I hate it. I'm so
Classic
sorry.
BV.
Our guy BV out there says Oliver Shillington really the only guy who is yet to make it to these informal skates. Is there anything to read into that, or is he just perhaps still in Calgary doing his EJ thing?
Well, you've always got to wonder a little bit about visa issues. He
True.
played for a Canadian team most recently. I don't believe he's from the U.S.
Swedish.
He's Swedish, so Swedish player playing in Canada. I'm kind of writing that off right now as that's probably a visa
Good
issue.
point. Didn't think about it. That's why I asked you. Thanks for the answer.
I mean, I'm guessing that might not
No,
be right.
that's probably it.
I think there's drama involved. No, I'm just kidding. I think Jesse's answer makes a lot of sense.
Megan, things you're looking for in camp.
Well, I love your note about Georgiev because I hadn't really thought about it from his perspective, how it does seem like the organization is revealing how they feel about his future here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, as we've discussed, we don't think it's even an indictment of his skill. It's the way they've approached this position previously and the type of money they're willing to put towards it. No matter what Georgiev puts into focus for the year ahead, he is he's fighting for his next contract. And so whether he has a great year with the Avs, to stay with the Avs and make a case to stay with them, which I imagine even he is finding a bit challenging at the moment, it's making a case for another team to take a chance on him and offer him big money. And so there's still so much incentive, whether he feels any type of way about the organization kind of indicating that they're going to move maybe a younger direction next year or just in a new direction for next year after it. There's still a lot for Georgiev to play for, and I am curious to see mentally how he handles that. I think to give a different answer from defense and goaltending, it's going to be what opportunity is presented to guys fighting for a job in the absence of Lehkonen at the start of preseason in camp opening. I think that's going to be a great opportunity, even if it isn't a permanent role, for guys to make a case for themselves. This is where, we've kind of penciled Kovalenko into conversations. I still expect him to be there, but with the kind of top six role being opened, that still leaves a lot of the fourth line as well to be addressed. Mm-hmm. And that gives rise to opportunities for someone like an Ivan to make a really strong case for himself and push to enter those conversations sooner than I think anybody expected, but that's been his trajectory to date.
Well, on our last show that we all did, us three together, I kind of we started the training camp conversation a little bit, and in it I was like, oh, should I ask these guys about a potential PTO? And I'm like, no, they don't have room for that this year, right?
Yeah.
And then in pops Pierre-Edouard Bellemare. How surprised were you guys to see that? And I guess, how does that affect all the guys that we were expecting to come fill those roles? Do we just expect them to kind of, I don't want to say flame out, but just end up with the Eagles for the entire season?
Yeah. So I want to just really quick. You mentioned Georgiev not only auditioning for the Avs to get a new deal, but he's doing a new deal either way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a good point because we've talked on the show about the Avs. The Avs are not afraid to move on and find a new goaltender if they feel you're too expensive.
But like I was saying, he wants to be in Colorado, I'm sure.
Totally.
Versus at least 20 other teams.
But to bolt those points, like, this is a big year for Georgiev, whether it's with the Avs or not. Beyond, like, he's got to go land another job. So, I think we should be, I think there should be a lot of eyes on Georgiev this training camp this season. But PEB, this was maybe the only PTO out there that would have made any level of sense to me. I still don't fully know on the money how they'll make it all work. But this is a guy with familiarity with the organization. Players like him. They know the work ethic. McKinnon and Rantanen went on his podcast this summer. This was a culture and a style fit that I thought made a lot of sense.
The Avs love to rehash. They love to bring back old guys, especially you remember not even early. They still kind of do it when Jared Bednar had familiarity from his Columbus days, and they bring back a guy from that. So there's obviously a lot of value they hold in just understanding the systems and the way they want to play.
Totally. And I thought it was a little interesting that it was a PTO and they didn't just outright give him a deal, because that to me says that we got to figure out if this money is going to work. And if there's a lot of these guys that will just park in the American League till we need them, I told Megan last week, he to me is the Cogliano replacement. He's your set and forget fourth line center. And until you get back either a fully healthy Gabe Landeskog and Val Nichushkin, at which point I really think that changes a lot of the conversation at the bottom of the lineup. But until then, Megan was mentioning the guys with Lehkonen being out. This is someone that you could extremely confidently plug in on your fourth line. Know he's going to kill penalties for you, and know he's going to give you good hard minutes.
Well, you say it all the time. What's Jared Bednar's favorite thing?
Predictability,
right? With all the other guys, sure, you could present them the opportunity, but it tells me there's not much confidence that they're going to thrive there, where you already know exactly what Pierre-Edouard Bellemare brings to the table.
Mm-hmm.
It's something Jared Bednar doesn't want to have to think about.
Right.
Doesn't want to have to.
Never had to with Cogs.
Yeah. Doesn't want to have to spend his training camp evaluating guys to come fill that role. So, yeah, I'm with you. It's a nice set and forget.
Megan?
Well, and I never viewed it as really in competition with the young guys, because I feel like there's just been this separated category of Chris Wagner, Kivi Ranta, now, Belly's in that conversation. Parker Kelly, I don't know if I already said his name there, Yuri Anala. Those are the guys that I think are competing on this side because they're a little bit older, and I think that they'll have a little bit more trust on their side, maybe even less for Anala. I think Anala is more American League for next year. But those guys, I think, have NHL experience that Jared Bednar would trust. And then the younger guys have the skill upside, but they don't have the trust. And I think they're competing within each other in these separate groups. And so I don't view Pierre-Edouard Bellemare as in competition with Cal Ritchie.
Mm-hmm.
I view these as separate things.
Yeah.
No, that's an excellent point. I always think of Riley Tufte because I really liked him, right? And his perfect role in an NHL squad would be a top 6 role, but he just wasn't there last year.
Mm-hmm.
He's not a top 6 player, where these guys are third, fourth liners. That's kind of their role, and they play the same game no matter what level they're at, right? So I like separating that into 2 categories. Good
Chloe had a question. I don't know if she already put it up and then took it back down because we weren't paying attention.
Oh, I did not.
I would sure like to know why all these goalies, though.
Kevin McDonald, go watch the interview. He talks about it.
You know what? We'll actually leave it at that.
Great answer.
Megan gets into that with Kevin McDonald about why did you guys do that at the draft? Because they did. They took a lot of goalies. We touched on it briefly last week in terms of replenishing the pipeline, but I think Kevin McDonald gives a much better answer than we could.
He does. So I recommend going to watch it. But if you also don't want to go watch it, the
You have to
summary.
go watch it.
Yeah. The summary
Paraphrase while teasing.
it's embracing how long it takes to develop goaltenders and why you need to, one, it's a little hard to predict the development of a goaltender because it can go, there are many paths that a goalie can take.
Yeah.
And so adding lots of volume in options is really good. And then doing so early in their career when they're young, knowing full well it's going to take many, many years for them to develop into goaltenders that would be on the brink of NHL conversations. That's what it was. It's just getting them in the development system.
I'm thinking back they've always had to ship in their goalies.
Mm-hmm.
They've never hit on a goalie. So maybe they're just trying to change the rhetoric there, change the effort that they're putting into.
David Abisher, I think, is the closest that you can say that was a guy they drafted, developed, and got quality NHL starts out of.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was traded in 2005, 6.
That was before Megan was born, so don't ask her.
Who?
No, wait. When did Wall retire in 02?
Yeah.
So then Absher was, I think, 03, 04, and then right before the lockout, he got traded. But that was seriously the last guy I can think of that was like if you want to count Budai, with all due respect.
Yeah.
He was more of like they drafted and developed a great backup for a long time.
Yep. Everybody else has been brought in through trade.
I mean, Varley, Grubauer, Kemper, now Georgiev, all European. I guess Kemper's
Jose
not.
Theodore, you could even go as far back, right?
Yep.
He made his made his mark with the Canadians and then came over here.
And then who was it after that? Or was that like the dark period when it was just like Andrew Raycroft and shit like that?
Say Raycroft.
Yeah. And then they finally like just cleaned house, brought in Varley and Jaguar, and then that's kind of been the rotation that we're in now.
Mm-hmm.
And Francouz came over when Varley left. Yeah. It's been a lot of importing goaltenders.
Yeah.
I think this is a building story behind the scenes too, with Craig Billington moving into a goalie development role. He's been trying to build out the resources to develop goaltenders, and this is newer to the organization. And so, bringing on Francouz as part of the scouting staff too.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are changes happening to that side of the organization that also give way to this happening now.
Yeah. It's the, like you said, like what Kevin McDonald talks about, and really Justus Annunen in the immediate is the example. I believe he was a 2017 draft pick, maybe 2018.
I think 17.
Well, and for years they would draft
6 or 7 years.
Not for lack of effort, right?
No.
They would draft guys and then they'd just flail on them, right? I think of Adam Werner, Peter Kavacha, Spencer Martin. That's a great one. And so I think they're just trying to figure something out there and try to hit on somebody because it's been so long since they've been able to.
And then to the point that one of you made about the unpredictability of it, Spencer Martin, that was a guy that, I mean, the organization and a lot of scouts looked at it as like, he was almost like he was approaching that like Askarov territory of like, this is a top end goaltender prospect. Played a couple games with the Avs, always just dripped out, just looked sick. Great pads and masks and stuff. Really struggled. And then he went back down, never really got it back. And then it wasn't until last year that he went on that kind of run with the Canucks. But even that has since fizzled out.
Yep.
And when they had to go to a backup in the playoffs, it was not Spencer Martin. And so again, like that's a guy who went from top goaltender prospect, AHL All-Star, goalie of the year, can't really cut it, struggles in the AHL, bounced around to a couple different teams. Maybe, no, probably. It's so hard to predict the path of these dudes.
Jagalov, as recently in the organization.
Yep.
And that was a guy who was taken, I believe, with the last overall pick, but immediately when the Avs took him, we were being told by people, hey, if they can get him to come over, like and stay here and stay playing in North America and not want to go back, because I think he was playing in Russia and he was planning on coming over to play a couple of years of major junior, And what we were being told is if they can convince him to stay, that's a high-end goalie prospect that's just really raw. He's really green, is what we were told. And he got over, and you saw that, and then it just kind of turned into a disaster with him. And he was the nicest kid.
It was such a strange situation because he was supposed to go overseas, and then the job wasn't available to him anymore.
That's what it was.
So he moved to the USHL, struggled there, then was in the North American Hockey League for a little bit, and I think just didn't love what kind of was always a plan B ended up being. I think if it had been his plan A, he could have maybe embraced it more wholeheartedly, but he met a lot of weird challenges. I'm sure it's just hard to find a net with goaltenders though too. I think that's kind of unique to the position.
I remember them talking about that at camp maybe last year, 2 years ago, that he needs to find a net, and they just never could. But I'm excited for goalie. I think there's legitimately interesting storylines all over the ice for the Avs this year in camp. And it really just hasn't been like that the last 2 years. 2022, they came in with a pretty stout roster to begin with, and you knew any of those in-season adjustments were going to be at the deadline. They go out and add, Cogliano, Lekin, and Manson. And then last year, you were, not passionate, but then after that you were coming in and we're on the title defense. So it was again a very robust roster. The only thing that was a little uncertain was all the stuff around Gabe Landeskog, but we really didn't even know the full extent of it yet. And then last summer they went out and really beefed up the depth, and they went and brought a bunch of guys in. So again, you felt like, well, there's not really a lot of spots up for grabs right now. There's no really exciting prospects. Cal Ritchie's hurt. Oscar Olausen still isn't quite there. This year feels different than the last 3 training camps that we've been in.
Yeah, I think Jonathan Drouin is kind of a microcosm of that, right? I think last year coming into camp, we're like, all right, let's see what he has to bring. Let's see how he fits. Now, I think there's a certain level of expectation for him. Does he continue kind of that momentum he built towards the end of the regular season there, where he really went on a bit of a point streak and was really just proving that he fits in? Or does he go back to the Jonathan Drouin that kind of started the season? I'm confident he continues because an extra year of comfort, an extra year of understanding Jared Bednar, but I think it's one of the question marks, right? But again, how does he react to the expectation?
I don't want to immediately change the way that everyone views Jonathan Drouin here, but I've got some expectations for him to keep it going last year, because I have expectations for him this year, because I looked at what he did in the years leading up to him arriving in Colorado. And when you take out his time having to be away, like when he was in games, he was effective. What we saw from him last year from a production standpoint was not an outlier if you go based on his, game by game averages and not just looking at the point totals at the end of the year, because he missed a lot of time in Montreal, both with injuries and then, he needed to step away for player assistance program, for mental health and things like that. When he wasn't in those positions, having to miss time, he was a productive player. So I was expecting that he was going to come in last year, take a little bit of time, and then find his groove. I think that was what we saw. He took the deal he took because of how much he liked the fit here. So I think it's fair to say, even from his standpoint, well, if you're willing to do that, it should be for good reason, because you feel that you can play at your best here. And I'm anxious to see what he does. And I don't think it's fair to put expectations of, Nathan McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen level production on him. But I think to say, I think it's fair to say that we should see at least what he did last year, if not a little bit better, because he shouldn't have to work through some of those same growing pains with a new organization.
I'm sure with the contract that he accepted for this year that his team will be meeting with the Avs early on to talk about the next one. And
January 1st.
He wants to make a great case for him leading up to that so that those negotiations go in his favor. Like a Georgiev playing for his next contract, he is in that same category. And if he does enjoy playing in Colorado as much as we see, he wants to keep playing here. And so that means coming off to a great start, picking up right where he left off, and that will just help him in those conversations for his next contract.
The last comment up there from Vaguely. Again, I said this before the season last year. I went on, I believe it was the Tell It Abs It Is podcast. And I said, look, I told them, I'm not predicting this. But when you look at his production and you consider who he's going to be playing next year and the offensive opportunities he's going to have, I told them 80 points isn't like a crazy pipe dream for Jonathan Drouin. Again, if you truly went and looked at what his, 82 game season, like point projections were, like he was always a 60 to 70 point over an 82 game season type of player. So I don't think saying that we could see 70 points out of Jonathan Drouin this year, like I don't think that's that far-fetched. And again, I know how much he enjoys that there's not crazy expectations on him here, so I don't want to go overboard. But really, it's more that I'm that encouraged by it. That right after they signed the extension, right at the beginning of free agency, I believe it was on free agent day, Alan Walsh had his own podcast, and he talked about that like there was a lot of emphasis on how good of a fit this place is for Jonathan, not just Jonathan Drouin, the player, but for his family. Obviously there's the very, very, very well documented friendship with Nathan McKinnon that goes back to when they were little kids. But I think as kind of an extension of that, he was immediately kind of plugged into McKinnon's friendship group and friendship pipeline. And, I think a lot of the significant others got along really well. He's got kids that he told us they really liked it here in Denver. And Alan Walsh made it clear on his podcast that like we were in a good situation and we're not going to mess with that. Why go chase the money somewhere else if it isn't going to have the same quality of life impact as this one will? But to your point, Megan, I'm sure that they didn't just do that to be nice guys. I'm sure there was hey, we'll see you in January for that next deal once we got a little bit more clarity on what's happening here. And I'm sure you're 100% right. Jonathan Drouin wants to put himself and his agent, Alan Walsh, in position to go to that table like, okay, that was a hell of a solid we did, you guys, and look at what he's doing already. Let's figure out how to make this work.
Yeah, no, fun stuff. That's a good point. I'm excited to see the way that all develops. And I think the penalty kill is one of the biggest question marks as well. Who fills the void for Lehkonen, Cogliano, Val Nichushkin, right? I think there's big shoes to fill there. Who's going to fill them? How are they going to acclimate to the structure
Will
there?
you throw up the second to last comment, Chloe? I think he's changed the style of play really with the focus on the D more than he used to be. That's because Montreal never had an offensive firepower at that point, so he could be selfish. So I think this is actually a great point that Jonathan Drouin put in the work to become a more well-rounded player. And I think about something that Brian Wilsey told you just this past weekend. Again, go check it out. With this Avalanche team and the way that they build things, guess what? The position that you've always excelled at and that may not be available. And I think that's true for both prospects and players. I think of guys like Jonathan Drouin and Ross Colton, Logan O'Connor. Those are full-time NHL players who find ways to make it work on this Avalanche roster wherever they're put. We saw Ross Colton play mostly center, but some wing last year. When he got to Colorado, he hadn't played center in a couple of years, but they said, we need you to play center. So we need you to figure out how to play center. Logan O'Connor will play any position they ask him to. And Jonathan Drouin, I think, had to learn that a little bit too, that, hey, they've got, premier passers and outstanding playmakers and goal scorers. Where else can I be effective if that's not what they need from me tonight? Now, as he settled into the season, and again, Jared Bednar talks about it, put in the work, put yourself in the right position, and you'll be shocked how often you find yourself in a play where you can let your natural skill and ability shine through if you do the right things. And I think that was what we saw to Jonathan Drouin. He said, okay, I'm not going to worry about that end of the ice. I'm going to make sure that I'm doing everything right. I'm playing my part in this system. I'm everywhere I need to be. And holy shit, I keep finding myself right in front of the net with the puck on my stick. And I think that was something that I think that's a great call out in that comment that maybe went a little bit under the radar. It wasn't just Jonathan Drouin suddenly finding his scoring and passing touch. No, he was doing the right thing everywhere on the ice, and he was building the right habits, putting in the work before and after practice with Nathan MacKinnon in the gym, on the ice.
Well, he's one of the few guys on this roster that can go step for step with Nathan MacKinnon.
Yeah.
So
and stand up to him. He talked to us about that. I know how to communicate with Nate. And what did he say to us? If you don't know how to go at Nate, it can go wrong. And he can snap at you and he can get on top of you. You got to know when to let him breathe. You got to know when you can step in. You got to know what to say. And he's someone that has that ability, like maybe only Gabe Landeskog has other than that. It's a great point.
I love Kay. She's so smart. And I think back to the opening season for Jonathan Drouin in the first 10 games. You looked at Tomas Tatar and you looked at Drouin and just weren't getting exactly what you had hoped from either player. But Drouin continued to get opportunities. Jared Bednar didn't give up on him. Mm-hmm. And this isn't to say that Tomas Tatar did something wrong. It was just what Jonathan Drouin was doing so right. And that was buying into the other aspects of his game and pouring into the decisions that he made away from the puck as well. And Bednar took notice of that, respected it, and rewarded it with opportunity. And that, led to such a productive player at the end of the day. And it took Jared Bednar seeing that and not giving up on him, I think, to help get him there. But also it took Drouin recognizing that and pouring into that part of his game.
Well, when you compare him to Tatar, again, that was a player who I did not feel made strides in other areas of his game, and he struggled because he wasn't just in the offensive zone ripping shots every other shift. And the Avs said, this doesn't work and we got to move on. Jonathan Drouin was actually a healthy scratch before Tatar was. He took that personally, adjusted his game, made the changes he needed to, and became a huge success story and was brought back for another year. So, like you said, it's not necessarily that Tatar did anything wrong on the ice per se, but I think there's a mentality.
There's two paths.
Right. And Drouin took one that landed him back here after a career year.
Yeah, and not to take a shot at Tatar, but I think there's a certain level of hockey IQ you need to have to succeed in this system. And I'll never forget Tomas Tatar after a practice, after they worked on PP2, just staring off into space and doing these kind of things with his hands and trying to figure out what he needs to do on PP2 to make an impact, and having conversations across the room while we're standing there.
Yeah.
So if you go here, do I go here? And he just couldn't seem to grasp it.
Well, and I'll take it a step further. And again, not to take a side swipe at a guy who's already kind of down, but I told you, JJ, I overheard a very similar discussion later in the year, but instead of Tatar, it was Ryan Johansson. And that conversation even got a little argumentative, where he was saying, no, I'm right. And there was actually 5 other guys, the 4 other guys in the unit and one of the penalty killers, who in unison, you cannot make, all went, no. And they were walking through it, and 2 other players walked over and literally were drawing it out. And he goes, well, if I'm going to make that pass, I've got to float it in or blah, blah, blah. And again, they went, no, dude, that's why we keep saying if you draw out here, or if this player draws out, that opens up the lane. And he goes, oh, because if they move there, it draws a guy in that. Oh, that is a good. And it was it was just clicking to him oh,
halfway through the year.
That is a nice play. Yeah. I thought you guys, because he was no, I have to sauce that over someone and they were no, dude, you're still not moving to the right place. You're trying to do, and that was the argument they're making. You're talking about this standing still. We're telling you have to move, because your movement allows a lane for this other guy to flash through, and that's going to take a defender with him. And he wasn't getting it. Mm-hmm. And as I was watching that unfold, I was thinking about when Tatar was doing something similar. And again, just wait, what are you guys talking about?
Yeah.
And both those players end up getting moved out in the same season they're brought in. So I think, I don't think that's an off the wall assessment of you got to maybe be able to think the game at a higher level than just being an offensive, shooter.
Indeed. Well, we've reached the hour point.
Yeah. Are there any other good comments that we missed, Chloe, that you put up that we missed?
Drouin is the dog whisperer. That's really good.
Wow, that's great.
We don't do shirts, but that should be one.
That should be a shirt. We should do that shirt.
LFC for goalie. That was the first thing that came to mind when you said Logan O'Connor will play any position.
He will. And I'm excited to see. He's another guy that I can't remember which of the two you brought it up just a couple weeks ago, but said like he was one of the very under the radar, maybe not talked about as much as he should have been, guys that they missed in the playoffs. Is that you?
Yep.
That like we talked a lot about Val and Gabe and all. Logan O'Connor makes a big difference in that series too against Dallas.
Brought up, perhaps not the best timing, but the penalty kill that they have shoes to fill there. I think you can rest assured on Logan O'Connor's abilities, right? Miles would still be a constant there, but I think they still have some holes that they got to fill. But Logan O'Connor should move from just a guy to the penalty kill to more of like the captain of the penalty kill.
Yeah, I agree with you.
The Cogliano of the penalty kill.
Pierre Belmar is the Cogliano replacement for this year, but I think that Logan O'Connor is the Cogliano of the future. What do you think his next deal is?
LFC, whatever he wants.
There was a comment that was up there that said, I'm nervous for pretty much everything outside of the top line.
Yeah.
So I get why people feel that way, but the thing that I will tell Avs fans for this year is, this year, maybe more than ever, you have to trust the process on this. They have been building this team under the assumption that they are going to get both guys back. And as of right now, there's not Vegas odds for this, but if you could bet on it, I'd say it's probably overwhelmingly more likely that they will end up with Gabe Landeskog and Val Nichushkin back in the lineup at some point this year. So I get why if you go into Puckpedia right now and do your roster builder, it maybe doesn't look super great for opening night, especially if you have no Lehkonen. But like I said, this is a year more than ever. Avs fans need to trust this process and know that it may not look super pretty off the bat. This is a team that has shown they can battle through adversity. They can overcome injuries. Jared Bednar has a group that knows what they're supposed to do. You've got Stanley Cup champions all over this roster. They are going to get themselves through until you get more clarity on if those players are coming back. Then guess what? If they're not, that's a ton of money that just opened up for the Avs to go out and improve this roster. So, like I said, if you go to Puckpedia right now and put together a lineup, yeah, you're probably not going to be super inspired. Add Lehkonen, add Landeskog, add Nichushkin back to that. Well, that's a whole line. You're shifting everything down by one.
Yep.
So, again, I get why people feel that way. But this is a year where it's going to be a little bit of a slow burn. Let's talk maybe more around Christmas of how we feel about the roster.
Yeah, you got all season to figure out.
Your roster doesn't have to be final on the first day of training camp.
Let's not all forget the year they won the Cup. That roster wasn't even a complete puzzle until the playoffs started.
Yep.
Right? So
Right.
As long as you can get close to a perfect lineup with everybody in it by the time playoffs get around, you just got to make the playoffs.
Just got to get in. This year more than ever feels like it just got to get in. I really don't care where they finish. As long as they get a ticket to the dance, I think come that time of year, look out. Like this could be a really scary team.
Yeah. Another thought just popped in my head, but we'll save it. We got to put all season ahead of us.
All right.
Training camp is ahead. Excited for it.
I don't hate having a few guys missing at the start of the season. That allows for a few of the newer guys. That's a great call out there. That's a great call out. That no matter what, you're gonna guys are gonna get opportunities. Let's see what they do with them.
I love this time of year.
I know, right?
Sometimes it's Sampo Ranta results, and you still get excited though to get that viewing.
Yeah. No, it's you're gonna get better opportunities. Hey, our boy Arif. I still believe having Casey Middlestat for a full season in training camp is an underrated part of this roster, even with the injuries to those other guys. We have not talked probably about Casey Middlestat as much as we should. I completely agree with Arif. Does great work, Mile High Sports. You saw when he was kind of playing fast and loose when he first got here, he was really good. You and I kept coming back to him. I think we had his name written down almost every playoff game. Love the effort.
Yep.
Doesn't look overwhelmed by the moment or the physicality. And in fact, he almost kind of he had a few of those plays after he was getting guys' face with just that shit-eating grin on his face. It's this dude might be a psycho. He might be built for playoff hockey.
It's such a generic thing to say that somebody can stick handle in a phone booth, but that's who Casey Middlestat is too. He has that kind of skill that even in the playoffs, I remember you and I looking at each other, even doing like one of these, like, whoa,
Dude,
did you just see that?
do you remember the one play in particular where he was in the corner and he had a guy like actively checking him and he checked his shoulder? I still to this day, because there was a guy checking him and defensive support coming in. Casey Middlestat looked back, saw the support coming for the defender, and he slipped his hips out and then just pulled the puck in one motion through two guys. They were both facing the boards and he was skating into the middle of the ice. You and I looked at each other like, what just happened? Like physically, what just happened? I don't understand how he got out of that. And that is the ability he's got, like you said, in tight, in a phone booth.
The magic man.
I think it's a great call from Eric. Super chat. Got a super chat from our guy.
The power of possibility.
This is the season of possibility.
And
right
friendship.
Now. And friendship. But even the Anaheim Ducks right now are sitting there like, we could make the playoffs. Like, we could do it. Like, we could put a roster together. Radko Gudas as captain could get us to the playoffs. That's what's fun about this time of year. And and that goes from the team level to prospect level. The power of possibilities. Vaguely sober. Always out here with the support. I do want to give a shout out to Avery. When I was saying that the start of this year is going to be tough, that's for you, Avery. We love you. We're here for you every single game, every single pod. But embrace what you said here. It allows a few other guys to get in. Avery is an extremely passionate Avs fan.
Just got to make sure Alexander Georgiev doesn't play 82 games this year, right?
That would be helpful. That would be helpful. All right.
Right on.
That's all I got.
That's all I got.
What do you got?
That's all I got.
No, super excited for camp. We got a lot of fun things planned and just ready to get to it. It's been for some reason it's felt like a longer off season than normal.
Yes.
It has felt like a longer off season than normal.
It has.
I'm just going to tear into this while we're
All right.
talking. I was going to hand you guys a few if you want to read them off.
Sure, why not?
Chloe's probably back to like, can these sons of bitches wrap it up?
No.
Take some, pass it down.
I want that last one.
Ooh, there you go. Yep.
Last batch.
Oh, wait. Oh, I'm sorry. There. There's a good one in that.
I
See it?
I did see it. That was the one I wanted.
The security strip. We got a Cal Clutterbuck here. Hey, we got a Colorado Thunderbird.
What?
Seth Jones.
All right.
Tomas Nosek.
I have more favorite Thunderbirds than others, I guess.
Ryan Graves, the king of pucks into shin pads. Jakub Voracek, now retired. Dan Vladar. What do you got?
I got Vinny Hinostroza,
That's a good one.
Greg Patterin,
Classic. Avs legend.
Jimmy Vesey.
Disappointing.
Yeah, he is disappointing, isn't he? Freddie Anderson. I feel like we've gotten him a couple times.
Injured a lot.
Braden Holtby.
Interesting. As a Dallas Star.
As a Dallas Star. Rasmus Ristolainen. Young Guns Mason McTavish.
Oh, damn. That might actually be a pretty good one.
Former Avalanche Derek Brassard.
Former every team in the league, Derek Brassard.
Yeah, he spent like 12 minutes here. Let's see. Yeah, that season he was with Pittsburgh, Florida, and Colorado. And of course, Mikko Rantanen. Mikko Rantanen.
A headshot
Nice.
photo.
That's
That's
good.
a good one.
That's good.
Let's see when that deal gets finalized.
Yeah, I know. Seriously.
Freak.
You get any good ones over there?
I got Patrick Nemeth.
Oh, all right.
Hey.
Feels like this. What was it? You had Graves, Brassard.
Yeah.
Just kind of feels like an era of Avs.
It does feel like
Robert Haig. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, I think that's Haig. Yep.
Jake Bean.
Overrated.
Wow.
You know what? That's what we should do.
Kind of mean.
With every card we pull, we should just be a little bit meaner about each person.
Juho Lamiko.
Who?
Cares.
Eric Holla.
All right. Yeah. Good fit for Boston. Can't say anything mean.
Just a checklist. Barclay Goudreau.
Oh, all right. Underrated guy, I feel
I
like.
think he's fallen off.
Yeah, was an underrated guy.
Arthur Kaliev?
No thoughts?
Jake McCabe?
Again, no thoughts. Neutral guy. Nothing mean to say.
Nick Foligno?
Overrated as hell as a player. Seems like a great teammate, though.
And Jason Dickinson?
Oh, I was thinking... Who was I thinking of?
Robertson.
Robertson. Yep, I was thinking of Robertson. Wow, you should...
Very underwhelming
Yeah,
stack here.
Megan doesn't have that lucky touch
no,
apparently.
not yet.
Whoa,
Not yet.
whoa, whoa. I got Quebec Nordiques Joe.
She did.
Oh yeah,
She
you're
did
right.
get Quebec
bubble
Nordiques,
gum
Joe.
pack. Those-
Yeah. That you guys didn't even eat.
yeah.
We can get out of here now.
All right, guys. Well, see you at camp.
We got stuff to talk about tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's media day.
Media day.
Hooray! Thanks everybody for hanging out with us today on this episode for Megan.
Oh,
and
we
Jesse.
will be at camp. We'll each have a select number of schedule magnets in our backpacks or our briefcases. So if you see us, come up to us, ask for a magnet. We'll have them for you there. And then after training camp, however many we have left, we will put out a call to mail to a select few of you, however many are left. So each of us will be stacked with Avs calendar magnets. So come get one from us if you see any of the three of us at camp this week. That's it.
Are you sure? All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us, and thanks for chatting with us. Of course, that's the best part, is when you guys throw in your comments and your opinions, and we try to riff off of them as best as we can. But for Megan, Jesse, I'm JJ. We'll see you guys at training camp.
Bye.
Bye.